Welcome to the Empowered Living Zone, where you can create the life you crave. With me, Dr. A, as a psychologist for over 30 years, a transformational life coach, and an expert in self-empowerment. My life's work has been inspired by the beautifully powerful resilience of the human spirit. We will share stories and successes of people who have not only overcome personal adversity, but have used their traumas and hardships courageously as a springboard into greatness. Create positive transformational shifts on your way to achieving phenomenal success. Get ready to level up as you move beyond the challenging terrain of your life's journey into the empowered living zone. Ignited by spirit, fueled by purpose, and guided by vision, the Empowered Living Zone show starts now. And you are listening to the Empowered Living Zone on Transformation Talk Radio. And with me today is my guest, Dr. Pat Baccili. Dr. Pat is an international award-winning talk radio host, TV commentator, certified career and belief coach, dynamic seminar leader, and inspirational speaker, award-winning author and researcher, and the CEO and owner of a successful inspirational company, Unlimited Possibilities Now. Dr. Pat is well respected in her various roles in the human potential field, and she has received numerous awards for her empowering message on radio. I am deeply grateful and honored to have Dr. Pat join me today. Welcome, Dr. Pat.
It's so great to be here. I am telling you, I'm really super excited about what we're going to talk about today. Really excited, right?
Yes, I'm curious about how this conversation is going to go today, Dr. Pat. And I purposely am not going to introduce the topic because I want to set this up. I want to set the stage for this. So today I want to share with my listeners what I would call a profound experience that I had at the beginning of April when I participated in an in-person kickoff of a deep transformational group experience. It's a coaching experience. Now, for those of you who do not know me well, I absolutely love to do deep work. Not only my own deep work, but deep work with my clients, my coaching clients. And it can be very intense, but it's worthwhile. And no, I'm not a glutton for punishment. I genuinely believe that this healing work is necessary to remove the barriers brought on by my own traumas and hardships so that my authentic self, the best version of myself that I'm intended to be, can be free to express itself in the world. Now, for those of you who do know me well, you're not surprised by what I'm sharing. So let me tell you about this experience. And before I get into it, I do want to say this. You know, I take privacy very, very seriously. So I want the listeners to know that I checked in with each of my group coaching mates to get an okay to share this experience. Now, I'm not going to be I'm not going to be giving any details or anything like that, but I did want to make sure that my group mates, in case they're listening, you know, and they don't want to be horrified by, oh my God, she's sharing an experience that I was included in. So full disclosure, I've gotten permission to discuss this. So let's go into this experience, Dr. Pat.
Let's do it.
It's exciting. It's very interesting. I'm curious what conversation it will stimulate and also what kinds of things it will activate and stimulate in our readers. So I'm at this kickoff. It's a very, very intense, emotional, vulnerable situation at the end of our second day. And this is after a full day of courageously vulnerable shares and authentic connection. We end the day with the facilitator asking for acknowledgments. Okay. So the end of the day, we are probably dealing a little bit with what I call vulnerability hangover. And we each have our turn on what I affectionately called the hot seat. One by one, each of us took the seat and we received acknowledgments from the group. So let me tell you what acknowledgments are in the coaching world. They are not compliments. in the coaching world, acknowledgments are expressions of appreciation, recognition, and validation that are offered to the receiver. They are specific, they're genuine, and they are focused on recognizing the receiver's strengths, courage, brilliance, and growth. So, one by one, each of us hesitantly locking eyes with the other members, hoping that someone else would have the courage to sit in the hot seat. But eventually, every one of us, with reluctance, occupied this seat, Dr. Pat. Now, mind you, this was not a required activity. We were not forced to do it. Yet each of us, even if it was with reluctance, chose to sit in this infamous hot seat. Now, here's what I want to talk to you about today and talk with the listeners about. I was struck by something. It was very clear that each person, as they sat in the hot seat and took in or received these acknowledgments, they were visibly uncomfortable. Now, I'm not saying a little uncomfortable. I'm saying a lot uncomfortable. And I know when it was my turn, my heart was literally beating out of my chest. I could feel my pulse in my eardrums. I felt like I was about to take a free fall out of a plane or jump off a 100-foot cliff. I felt dread. And at the same time, I felt excitement and exhilaration. And I wanted to be in the hot seat. And I suspect, based on the body language and the facial expressions of my group coaching mates, that they felt similarly. Now, as I witnessed this experience, Dr. Pat, for myself and for others, I had this profound insight. And I was thinking to myself, isn't this interesting? That the very thing that we so desperately want is the very thing that we are so terrified of. We want so desperately to be seen and valued, to feel like we matter to everyone else. And yet, in that moment of truth, when we have the opportunity to really be seen, we are truly terrified by this. So herein lies the great paradox: to be seen or not to be seen. What do you think, Dr. Pat?
That's the question. That's the question. And, you know, I've been coaching people in media, well, let's just say live streaming media, podcasting for over 20 years. That's when I started this. But I've also been coaching people and speaking way before that. And it is a conundrum to be seen or not to be seen. And, you know, people think, let me hire this coach to help them with media. And the coach never addresses anything emotional. They're like, oh, let me teach you how to do this. Let me teach you how to do this. Because mastering a skill is not so hard. But mastering a skill in front of 1,000 people, that's a whole nother game, isn't it? And part of that is, I think, in what you said. What'd you call it? Obviously uncomfortable. A lot. You know, I've done that exercise. That is an understatement. I mean, when you watch the person literally sweat and pit out their shirts, right? Men and women, I want to be clear. It's hard to receive, isn't it?
Yes. And it is like jumping out of a plane. It really is. I mean, I can only speak for myself. And I am not exaggerating when I say my heart was racing and it was beating out of my chest. And I literally thought I was jumping out of a plane. It was terrifying. And I was struck by that. I thought it was really interesting that we are so frightened of being seen. And just like you, Dr. Pat, I will say that this, you know, if I were to list like the top 3 challenges that I consistently see with my clients, and by the way, I'll put myself in this box, that I see with my clients are not enoughness, imposter syndrome, being overtaken by the inner critic, which I call the cousin to imposter syndrome, and hiding, really hiding, because of this fear of being seen. It's crazy. It is crazy.
Yeah. And, I want to congratulate Zoom for not giving people a choice anymore. And so isn't that a weird congratulations? And what do I mean by that? We'll talk more about it when we get back. But when we were forced, and I'm going to say that because that's how it feels for people that don't want to be seen. When we were forced to show up on meetings, Zoom meetings, not in the office, like from your home. I mean, it's one thing to be in the office at a meeting because you can basically hide even in a room like that. But there was something about having to do these online meetings. And my gosh, there was a ton of them, like 24/7. You couldn't hide, right? And there are the commercials that say, okay, great, don't stand up because you probably have your pajamas on. But that wasn't the point. People had to show up. And when you show up in that way, right, you get the impact of the camera compounding the situation, right? And then because it's Zoom, unlike in a room, they make you go around and like, who are you? Like, oh, you're Dr. Pat from what? Oh, I mean, honestly, it really devastated people, but it brought them out of their shell. Don't you think it was that next step that helped people take that step forward, but that didn't take the anxiety or fear away?
Right, right. You bring up an interesting point that I hadn't considered into this moment, and that is, a lot of post-COVID meetings are on Zoom. And you're right. When you're in a meeting room, you can blend, you can be the wallflower, you can be not noticed. Yet when you're on Zoom, the camera's on you, and it amplifies those experiences, right?
Yeah.
And it makes me kind of wonder, you think about context here. If you get on LinkedIn, if you get on Facebook, if you look at different professional groups, what are the topics today? Inner critic and imposter syndrome. And, this may not be coincidental. Maybe these things are kind of floating to the surface in terms of talks, because that is what's salient right now. That's what's in our face right now, because we're having to face our own fears of not being enough, our own fears of being rejected. Because guess what? We're all on camera now, and it's terrifying. Yeah. Well, we're going to take a quick break. And when we get back, I'd like to discuss into greater detail this whole great paradox of being seen or not being seen. You're listening to the Empowered Living Zone with Dr. A and Dr. Pat, and we'll be right back. We are back on the Empowered Living Zone with me, Dr. A, and my guest, Dr. Pat. Now, if you would like to inquire about the opportunity to work with me, or you would like to learn more about empowered living or psychospiritual transformational life coaching, you can reach me through my website at www.empoweredlivingcoaching.com. That is www.empoweredlivingcoaching.com. Now, before we start unpacking this whole idea of the importance of belonging in our lives, Dr. Pat and I were talking at break, and I would love, and I invite Dr. Pat to share her own story of this wonderful paradox.
Thank you. Here's what I want to say. We just did a show earlier today on removing obstacles and challenges and how we call things in. So it was very clear to me before the pandemic, right before the pandemic, that I was really up-leveling my speaking game. I love to speak. Yes, I do the shows, of course, but I really love to speak. I really wanted to be out. I wanted to be around like-minded people, but I also wanted to do something good in the world. And I get an email from Jane Peralta, who used to work with our show. She was one of our great salespeople. And Jane says, you got to go to California you're being requested to be in a music video. And I called Jane. I said, okay, is this like a punk thing? She said, no. Tata Prince is John Legend's nephew, and he's created an incredible song. And yeah, we're doing a music video, and we're doing it down in California, and John will come in and do his part. And then I thought, you got to be kidding me. She said, no, all you have to do is get down here this weekend, find something white to wear, and come down. Everybody's looking forward to meeting you. You're on the A list. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, yeah, you're on the A list. I wasn't going to go. I got so paranoid. I got so afraid. All of the things you just talked about, what we do, the paradox. See, I had called this in. I'm actually going through this again. I had called this in. I said, I want to be out in the world. I want to take this message the way I used to speak all the time. I was at least doing on stage a couple of times a week. And I have shared the stage with the best mentors. I said to you before, Shirley MacLaine taught me how to walk a stage, like at the Benaroya Symphony Hall. The most incredible Shirley MacLaine is like, if you're going to be in front of me, you're going to learn how to walk. But this was like, I am an imposter. What am I doing at a video? Why do I belong here? Why do these people want to meet me? What is it? I don't get it. I don't understand. And I had convinced myself not to go until it got down to the wire. And I hadn't booked my flight, which means if you wait for it. So Jane calls me and said, look, did you book your flight? I said, no. Well, good, because you need to bring Jessica with you because they want you now to do interviews. And now, bottom line is, now I could not go. Called Nordstrom's and I found somebody to help me out. I think her name was Lindy. Help me out. I said, please find me something white to wear. And she said, it's fall here, but I'll do my best. She found the best outfit. It was a white jumpsuit and I had a blast. But even when I got there, Dr. A, I was hiding and I had the director of the video dragging me around, introducing. I had Double K walk up to me and he wanted a picture of me. And he actually stands next to me on the stage. I got a great picture of him leaning over and me over behind him. But I wouldn't have gone. It was the most incredible video. There were other versions done with kids. The song was Love One Another. Tay is an incredible star. I got to watch how John Lennon works. All business, really, why he is as good as he is. And I got to meet the most incredible people. I don't know what clicked for me not to stop being intimidated. Maybe it was shaking hands with Beyonce's mom. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was being on stage with Alfred Woodard. I don't know what it was. But there was a point that you get to where you realize you've asked for this and you need to get over yourself. Had I not gone, Jessica and I got on the plane. And as we came home late at night, I looked at her and I said, I'm different. And I'm not different because of the experience. It was because of the people that I met. It was because of their purpose. And then on the plane, I said to her, we have to create something called AI for the soul. Now, mind you, nobody was talking about AI in 2019. We were one of the first to grab an AI domain. We had to wait for AI to catch up. But you see, what you're talking about is the paradox. We call something in, and it doesn't have to be this, but we call something in, and then when it shows up, it takes something else to get us to do it. And I'd like you to talk to that because it takes something else. We call it in, it shows up. I don't care if it's a promotion, if it's this, if it's that, and it shows up and we almost don't do it. Or we sometimes don't do it. Because even you at that workshop, at what you were doing, everybody had to get over themselves just like I did, right?
Yes. It takes an incredible amount of courage. And I, as I say those words out loud, I think isn't it ironic, Dr. Pat, that we're talking about something that we would at least believe that you just show up and you're you, and it sounds so easy. And yet it is so terrifying. And, your experience speaks to it, very clearly and very strongly that you're invited. People want you there. They're excited about you being there. And there's a reason they're excited about you being there, because you are this wonderful bundle of brilliance with all these gifts, and they see that. And here's the irony in all of this, and we'll talk more about this at closer to the end. Here's the irony, and this is a lesson, quite frankly, Dr. Pat, that I am currently learning. And that is, you can't hide. You cannot hide. You think you're hiding, but you're not. And I realized this when I was doing this exercise on the second day of this kickoff. And I sat in this chair and I took in all of the acknowledgments. And as I took them in, I was like, oh my God, I haven't fooled anybody. I thought I was doing a really good job at tampering myself down, making myself small, and not being seen. And guess what? It didn't matter. They saw me. And, going back to something that you just said, it's like, there is nothing more magical and more powerful when you show up and you are who you are, and you just lean into whatever the experience is, and you don't allow the ego, the anxiety, the imposter syndrome, the inner critic to talk you out of showing up. It is magical. Yeah.
And when you can do that, when you can be there, and I think Emily's going to put up some clips. When you can be there, it is transformative. And I said to you, there's this picture of me, we're on stage, and there's this picture of leaning over, and I think Emily's going to put some of these clips up. But you can also see we're all there, and we are having like a blast, right? We're just, none of us really are trained in how to do what we're doing. But you could see at some point something takes over, and we're dancing and we're doing something and we're on stage and we're pointing and we're moving and we're just like crazy people, right? There's one picture I think I just sent Emily where we're just dancing on stage, and it's incredible. But there are other things that happen. It taps into something inside of us that I mentioned to you early on, from prehistoric times and from birth. There's an innate ability or desire for us to show up and be seen. As an infant, you don't know anything else, but I need to get somebody's attention. Hello. And you don't think about, am I crying too loud? You're not doing that. You're like, wow, right? That doesn't go away. Every one of us has that. But the question is, how do we fulfill it? How do we do that? How do you get to show up in some kind of white jumpsuit thing you're wearing and get to take pictures with some of the most incredible people that you know? How do you do that? And boy, you should see the video clips of us dancing on stage. It is just ridiculous and fun, and never worried about it. I never, and then I'm in between these two amazing men. Both of them in their own right have established so much. And there's a point that we're dancing and they decide they're going to just, each of them is going to, they're going to take turns dancing with me on this video. I could have never imagined that. But you know what? I have thought back many times, what if I didn't go? Dr. A. So we're talking with folks today, all of you. It doesn't have to be a music video, but what if you don't go? What if you don't go? What if you let fear so drive your life that you don't go? People can fill in their own blank right now. I don't think I'm going here, ... What if you don't go? I am very clear this would have been I don't have a lot of regrets, but this would have been right up there. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think something that's really important to highlight that you said, Dr. Pat, is this is in us. We are wired. We are wired to be seen. We are here for a reason. Each one of us has something to offer the world. And in our offering, it's about showing up and being who we are. That's the gift. That's our gift to the world. And children know that. I mean, think about 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. They're like, look at me. Look how wonderful I am. I am the best, fill in the blank, because they believe in their own brilliance. And along the way, we get kind of knocked around with life, and rejection and judgments and those kinds of things. And we get timid and we get shy and we hide, so it isn't natural for us to hide unless we're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger or something. But it's not in our innate ability or DNA. We're here to shine. We're here to show up. We're here to contribute. And when we allow our fear to take over, we don't. And who's missing out? Not only are we missing out, but the world is missing out. So who are we not to shine? So we're going to take a quick break. We will be right back and we'll continue this discussion. You're watching or listening to the Empowered Living Zone with me, Dr. A, and my guest, Dr. Pat. We're back on the Empowered Living Zone with me, Dr. A, and my guest, Dr. Pat. And we are unpacking this great paradox of to be seen or not to be seen. And we've been talking about the different sides of this paradox. On one side, we have our need to belong, our need to be embraced and accepted in our pack, so to speak. And on the other side of that is our vulnerability and our courageous vulnerability, as I will say, to allow ourselves to be seen by others. And, one thing that I want to do, Dr. Pat, is I want to make it really clear what belonging is. And if the listeners are really interested in digging into this more deeply, one person that I would recommend reading is Brené Brown. Brené Brown is a renowned researcher and author and has extensively explored the concepts of vulnerability, belonging, shame. And she's got some great books that address it. She's got The Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Power of Vulnerability, Rising Strong, Atlas of Heart. And the one that she really gets into belonging about is Braving the Wilderness, The Quest for True Belonging and the Courage to Stand Alone. And as I say this, I want to make it really clear about what is meant by belonging. We're talking about belonging. Everybody knows what belonging is in terms of their yearning for belonging. And yet sometimes there's a mistake about what it is. Belonging is not about fitting in. It is not about conforming to societal expectations. Really, what genuine belonging is, it's about you showing up authentically as yourself, warts and all. And for many of this, it takes us to the other side of belonging, and that is vulnerability. And, it's interesting. I think we have all had experiences with vulnerability. We know when we're feeling vulnerable, our heart might race, our voices might get shaky. We might start to get a little shaky. And it's interesting because, vulnerability is really about this core of very tender, difficult feelings and emotions like shame, like insecurity, like uncertainty, fear, anxiety. These are all feelings that lead us to feel vulnerable. What people don't realize, though, Dr. Pat, is on the other side of those very difficult, intense feelings are joy, creativity, love, curiosity, playfulness. And so when we cut ourselves off and numb ourselves from vulnerability, we're actually numbing ourselves from joy and playfulness and creativity and all these wonderful, beautiful other feelings. And that's really important to consider. And, people have vulnerability wrong. And I'm going to tell you, whoever said vulnerability is weak, I don't know what in the hell they're thinking, because I have never felt weak being vulnerable. It's the scariest thing I have ever done, is being vulnerable. How about you, Dr. Pat?
Yeah, it can be scary, but it's not weak. Vulnerability is powerful. And it's not only powerful if you get to experience it yourself. And I want to encourage people, if this is something that you're asking yourself right now, yeah, I agree with you, but I can't do it. There are people that can help you. Dr. A, you're one of those people. But vulnerability is powerful. There's nothing more powerful than seeing it in our movies, right? Or seeing it in a group. Or it doesn't matter where you see it, you recognize it immediately. You may not put that term on it, but when you see somebody in that state, something within you changes. Something within you becomes more powerful. And I think that's what we're forgetting. How we can teach each other this.
Absolutely. Not only teach each other this, Dr. Pat, but really slowing down and appreciating the beautiful gift that comes with it. We can't experience genuine connection without vulnerability. I often say that vulnerability is the currency of connection. You cannot experience genuine connection without allowing yourself to be seen. All your imperfections, all your insecurities. But let's also face it, it's not just about imperfections. It's not just about insecurities. No. That's what we're afraid of. Right. But we've got brilliance. We've got beauty, we've got brilliance, we've got wonderful gifts that make us who we are as individuals. And so, vulnerability isn't just about the yucky stuff, the things that we're embarrassed about or ashamed of, or we fear are going to be judged. On the other side of that is our brilliance and the ways in which we shine. And, you spoke to something that I think is really very powerful. We all, as human beings, this is a common human experience. This is what makes us human. And no matter how much we want to deny it, no matter how much we want to numb from it, we have all had the experience of vulnerability. And in addition to having that experience of vulnerability, we've all had at least one experience where alongside that vulnerability, we were seen. We were embraced. We were valued. And I will tell you, I'm not sure if there's anything that tops that experience that comes when we're truly seen. And that is that connection, that genuine connection. It is so deep in our being. We don't even have to have words for it. We know, we just know innately where it is and when we're there and when the other person's there. And so, my hope for the listeners as they hear this message today, Dr. Pat, is I hope that they are willing to answer this invitation, to say yes to this invitation, and to say yes to showing up courageously, warts and all, and knowing and trusting that you belong. Even when you're rejected, even when somebody judges you, you do belong. You belong here. And having the courage to show up anyway and to stand, even if you're standing alone for a moment, to have that courage and to understand and to really appreciate the payoff is phenomenal. There's nothing greater than genuine human connection, and it makes vulnerability worth it. So I think that's it for today. Is there anything you'd like to add, Dr. Pat?
I just want to add one more thing. I want to thank you for doing a show like this, because you opened up the door and shared your own experience, your own vulnerability. What I want to say, the most powerful thing that someone ever had said to me, and it was at a 12-step meeting, is when they thanked me for my vulnerability. And in their words, they said, thank you for your vulnerability and thank you for giving me permission to be vulnerable. Now, you all can take that any way you want, but what that means is it's contagious in a really good way.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Pat. I think that's very important. When we show up and we're vulnerable, we are giving permission for everybody else to show up and be vulnerable. We can be courageous together, right? We can be courageous together. All right. Before we end today, if you're curious about empowered living and psychospiritual transformational life coaching, or you'd like to work with me personally, you may contact me through my website at www.empoweredlivingcoaching.com. That's www.empoweredlivingcoaching.com. Stay tuned for the next episode or podcast of the Empowered Living Zone. Join us every first and third Tuesday of every month at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to the Empowered Living Zone show with me, Dr. A, to create the life you crave. Tune in on the first and third Tuesdays at noon Pacific Time on transformationtalkradio.com and get ready for another show. Say yes to creating positive and empowering change in your life and move beyond life's challenging terrain into the zone of success. Be ignited by spirit, fueled by purpose, and guided by vision in the Empowered Living Zone. For more information on how to do deep transformational work with me and to create the life you crave, visit empoweredlivingcoaching.com. That's empoweredlivingcoaching.com. See you next time.